Week 6, Part 2. 12.1. Discourse Communities and Literacy Practices. 12.2. Competencies and Composition. 12.1. Discourse Communities and Literacy Practices. Discourse Communities. Sometimes we write for an audience of one, ourselves. We write to learn and deepen our understanding. We write to purge our anger or stoke our excitement. We write to express our joy or understand our sorrow. We write to remember what to buy at the grocery store or when a paper is due. More often, we write for an external audience. We write to connect to others or to be seen. We write to create boundaries or communicate our ideas. We write because we need or want something specific from someone. We write to people we love and to people we have never met. We write to an audience of one or a public audience of anyone and everyone. We can even write to things that aren't alive or can't read. We all write different things in different ways to these different audiences. We use a different tone with our parents than with our partners. We use different language with our teachers than with our friends. In addition to multiple audiences and intentions, we write in different places on different devices and different platforms. We text on phones and tablets and type on laptops and desktops. Occasionally, we dig out a pen and look for a pad without an eye. Each space we write in and every surface we write on offers us a different arena and different audiences, perhaps even a different side of ourselves. Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and any other existing or emerging platforms all allow us to contact and connect with different people through writing and requires us to write in different ways. Our writing represents who we are in different places at different times, and these different spaces require different practices to communicate with the different audiences. Consciously or unconsciously, we shift shapes and switch codes to be understood and to fit within each. When we engage in all these written exchanges, we also become audiences for the writing of other people. We receive and read and interpret and respond to writing, often by writing back. Understanding what we read requires contextualizing and supplementing the text. Often demonstrating understanding also requires translating visuals within the textual communication, all of which requires insider information. When your best friend sends you an emoji or a meme, or just two specific words, you immediately know what it means, and you might be the only person on earth who knows. When a few of your friends engage in a group chat, there are specific references and shared experiences you all allude to that only insiders can understand. Likewise, when extended groups communicate about a shared interest, they use literacy practices that connect insiders and exclude outsiders. Defining discourse communities. One way to look at groups is to see them as discourse communities and to identify the specific ways they communicate through writing and reading as literacy practices. According to Swales' definition, discourse communities are, quote, groups that have goals and purposes and use communication to achieve their goals, end quote, paragraph 6. Some discourse communities are formed around personal or familial ties, like House Lannister, House Stark, House Targaryen from Game of Thrones, or residential locations, Juniper, Poplar, Beta, Castor, off-campus, or social interests, birdwatching, gaming, Game of Thrones fans. Others are professional, accountants, psychologists, farmers, teamsters, or political or civic, vegans, hunters, USF alumni, Girl Scouts, Shriners. These associations feed and are fed by worldviews and perspectives that undergird the connections and actions of the groups. Within institutions of higher education, we find an academic discourse community that is made of distinct groups defined by shared individual practices within the larger community. Like other communities, specific skills and knowledge are required to communicate successfully as a reader and a writer within the broad academic community and within the more narrow communities make up the larger academy. As students at USF, you are part of a community within the larger academic discourse community. You will also be involved in related groups that may or may not be directly related to your academic course of study. In fact, the networking and the development of soft skills that result from participation in higher education have been identified and accepted as important and valuable elements of the educational experience. Additionally, a sense of belonging to a community is recognized as a competency that impacts success in school and beyond. Specifically, we know that there is a connection between student involvement in communities across campus and the likelihood of success and satisfaction at USF. Research suggests that if you find a supportive group of fellow students who are engaged in similar activities, you're more likely to seek and find the support we know benefits all students and everyone beyond the academy. The major goal of ENC 1101 is to allow you to develop and practice the literacy practices that will help you advance into your academic and professional areas of interest. We understand that developing your writing skills in conjunction with competencies such as community building and belonging will also impact your ability to participate in academic discourse communities and the related civic communities connected to your university experience that will impact your success within and beyond USF. While discourse communities include people, they also exclude people. General skills and literacy practices bridge all the distinct areas within the academy, but there are specific skills required for entry into and success within subgroups like majors and disciplines. Foundational levels of such skills are required to gain entrance to the university, and these general skills are developed through 1,000 and 2,000 level courses across the disciplines. Within this general education, students engage the academic skills that prepare them to specialize within their fields of choice and areas of talent. Writing is a skill that spans all academic arenas. General writing skills are required to enter the academy, formal writing skills are required to advance into a major or discipline, and discipline-specific writing skills are developed within the field. Literacy practices. Our literacy practices are what we do with our literacy. Anything we do that uses reading or writing is a literacy practice. If you take notes to remember, use jargon to be understood, send someone an LOL, post a salty comment, or encourage a friend, you're using your literacy. If you are on the receiving end of any of those communications, you are equally involved in a literacy practice. The more you practice with practices, the better you become at communicating through writing and decoding written communications. Within these larger acts of literacy, we make subtle moves to embed coded terms and turns that allow our writing to be understood by specific audiences. In Project 3, we will take a closer look at how we make moves and use codes to send and receive messages through text, but to start, we want to look at how groups use larger literacy practice to communicate. Because writing touches all areas of ourselves in our academic, professional, and personal lives, writing impacts our ability to succeed in school, at work, and in relationships. We create and express who we are and who we want to be through the text and images we produce and receive. When we are conscious of the ways in which literacy practice impacts our ability to engage with people and enter discourse communities, we can have more agency, more choice and say, in our actions and responses. Understanding the requirements for entrance and participation within communities provides us with access to more communities and allows us to become active and communicate successfully as members of the communities we choose to enter. Joining a group and participating within that discourse community requires understanding that the expectations of communication within the group and possessing the specific skills and the knowledge necessary to communicate and practice within the community. If you want to join the football team, you need the skills to play the game. If you want to join the band, you need to know how to play an instrument. If you want to join student government, you need to know how to work with and for a group. If you want to get into the major of your choice, you need to demonstrate application of the skills of the field. All of these practices require understanding and operationalizing the literacy practices required to communicate within each group. The literacy practices and the required skills and knowledge needed to enter a discourse community must be expanded and operationalized in order to remain in and succeed within the group. Successful football players know the plays and rules of the game and the techniques and strategies needed to win. Successful band members know the music and can play it while performing a precision drill and paying attention to the nuances of an audience. Successful SGA members know how to make people believe in them, in their policies, and in themselves in order to build communities that people want to be a part of and that function well. Successful participants within any academic discipline know how to apply the reading, writing, and research skills connected to the practices of the field. All these examples and practices that are connected to literacy practice and not coincidentally require practice. All skills must be practiced and applied purposefully in order to be maintained and improved. Perhaps you were great at Taekwondo in 7th grade, but if you haven't kept up with it, your high kick probably isn't so high anymore. And your 3rd grade recorder skills are fading every day. Maintenance requires practice, but improvement requires commitment. The degree of commitment required to succeed in JV football is different from the requirement to participate in varsity and then college and then the pros. Even advancing from participation to success, let alone excellence, takes an additional level of commitment and perhaps an element of talent. Academic success is no different, and as you move into your majors and into your professional practice, the commitment required to participate and succeed deepens, and the expected proficiency in literacy practices and the associated jargon expands in breadth and depth. Even though not all sports are team sports, every action includes interaction in some way. Tennis players are still on a team and have a coach and an opponent. A soloist has a conductor and an orchestra and an audience. SGA representatives are elected and potentially re-elected by constituents and have to work with other representatives to reach compromises. Your assignments will be read by you and your peers and your instructor and potentially other audiences. By now, you recognize that these are literacy practices that connect each of these communities. And you should be starting to see that the underlying competencies that allow skills to be developed are a necessary part of the picture. Improvement generally involves feedback and collaboration with others, which means that in addition to learning and practicing and adjusting and sustaining, development of a skill also requires applying the soft skills needed to communicate and collaborate with others, as well as provide, receive, respond to feedback. Width of practice contributes to depth. So skills and knowledges must be applied across settings and environments ranging from low-stakes practice at home to high-stakes performances. Drills are not the game. Scales are not the song. Speeches at home aren't speeches in the chambers. Acing an introductory course in a field is only the beginning of success in a major or in the connected careers. Because success in high-stakes situations is built on the hard work and dedicated practice behind the scenes and before the show, the competencies needed for successful practice are the foundations of successful performance. In other words, developing any skill requires practice, and practice requires a number of other competencies like conscientiousness, confidence, self-control, and self-reflection. Looking at literacy practices in your DC. Our expository overview is built around a question that asks us to inform our readers about the ways in which a discourse community uses writing to communicate. To begin the expository overview, we need to select a DC and look at the literacy practice we can identify through the writing of the group. While you may or may not be in the group you decide to explore, you should have access to the public text of the DC. Because the communication of public goals is one of the criteria Swales uses to define a DC, it makes sense for you to pick a DC with public goals and therefore a public place to post public goals. Before you can look at the writing of a DC, you'll need to look at the writing of a DC. You need to look for the writing of a DC. The degree of ease in locating the writing of a group could be included in considerations of communication. If it is difficult to find or read the communications of a DC, whether on purpose or not, it can impact how the communication is received or not received. For our purposes, it makes sense to start by looking at obvious and likely accessible sources such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, the local chapter website, or the national website. Less accessible sources are equally acceptable, so if you can locate print materials or see signs around campus or receive emails to members or prospects, feel free to consider those texts as well. You may want to start by selecting a DC that interests you, but the way to find that group is probably through writing. So recognize that you are looking at the DC and the literacy practices from the start, which should reinforce the interrelated nature of the discourse community and the literacy practices it uses to communicate. For now, just start paying attention to what you see around you every day and what you encounter organically. You may find that university-related groups are reaching out, perhaps in writing, to inform, recruit, or engage you already. Start to pay attention to how that is done. Is it funny or encouraging or inspiring? Does the communication use terms specific to that group? If you get it, you are probably a target audience of that communication. If it strikes you as boring or annoying or offensive, it could be that you aren't the person they are writing for and that they are intentionally or unintentionally letting you know that you aren't a fit for their group. In addition to paying attention, also explore campus labs, which will allow you to search for student organizations at USF and provide you with a direct sample of their written communications. Before you pick one discourse community to read about, think about, and write about, just start paying attention to how DCs use LPs around you on a daily basis. Assignment 12.1. After completing the reading, provide a considered response to the following questions. Number 1. Define discourse community. Number 2. List one discourse community in which you are currently or formerly a participant. This can be personal, familial, social, professional, academic, residential, civic. Number 3. Define literacy practice. Number 4. In what spaces did the community you noted above communicate through writing? Number 5. What are some discourse communities at USF you are interested in joining? Number 6. What texts have you seen from any USF DC on campus or online? 12.2. Competencies and composition. We've talked about a number of competencies throughout the readings, and we have practiced and discussed some of these through our attached assignments. Pausing to look at what we mean and allowing you to look at how it impacts your success is important. Broadly, competencies are related to your academic success and your personal happiness. Specifically, competencies are related to your communications with and participation within any group or organization or discourse community. Different groups talk about different competencies that have differing impacts on different people. When we discuss competencies, we look at the way they impact you in your writing and your success. So as a result, we are generally talking about the intrapersonal and interpersonal competencies related to student success, such as teamwork and conscientiousness. The National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine consider competencies such as adaptability and problem solving to be 21st century skills that are necessary for success in formal learning and professional development. We know that these areas can be developed and that discussing their importance will facilitate their development. An easy example is grit. Think of an ad for the military or for athletic apparel, or think of the training montage from Rocky or Rocky 2 or Rocky 3 or Rocky 4 or Creed, or a montage of Rocky montages, or the South Park version. Short theme song infused clips that lead to victory are usually the way we see grit demonstrated on screen. But everyday struggles usually involve less sweat and glory and rarely involve any of the songs from your workout playlists that keep you going when the going gets tough. And even though Rachel, Shakira, Melissa, Katie, Sia, Pink, Alicia, Sarah, Old Taylor, New Taylor, Miley, Gaga, Beyonce, Gwen, The Chicks, Alanis, Madonna, Reba, Cher, and Gloria, ask anyone you know who's over 60, it's on one of their playlists, might empower you to keep cleaning or running, they don't help you sustain your focus on the page you are rereading for your homework. You get the point. Grit isn't pretty, it's gritty. It is doing your work even though there is no one to make you. It's staying up late and reading instead of going to a party. It's sticking with an assignment you don't understand until you get it. It's asking for help after you've put in the effort on your own. It's wanting to do your best and trying really hard. It's doing work for yourself because you want it to be good and you want to learn from it, not just because it is required and graded. It's recognize that you can get away with all sorts of stuff, but you hurt only yourself when you don't make the most of an opportunity to grow. It's understanding the results they show at the end of these 3-minute montage took hours of work every day for months to achieve, and that the results will fade without sustained attention. Grit impacts your ability to create clear messages that can be understood by your reader and to read carefully and critically in order to comprehend messages that are communicated with you through writing. But the real result of sticking with something until you see the payoff of your grit and commitment is that you will be able to trust yourself to know that if you can't get there in 3 minutes, you won't give up and assume you can't get there at all. What we are calling grit is broadly defined as conscientiousness, which you also see discussed as resilience, perseverance, or tenacity. Conscientiousness has a significant impact on success, and it can be developed. Other competencies that specifically impact student success are a sense of belonging, believing that you can learn and grow, believing that what you are learning is useful, being interested and curious, caring about other people, believing that you have a positive future, and believing that you can succeed at the task. It's easy to see how these elements impact your ability to communicate through writing. For instance, if you don't care about other people, you will not see the value of communicating with an audience in a way that takes the impact of the text on the audience into consideration because you simply won't care about the impact. Further, if you don't have the grit to stick with reading, it will be very difficult to absorb scholarly texts that take the time and patience to understand. Competencies are developed more than they are taught. In part, that is because it has to be up to you. Perhaps we can use skills and drills and quizzes to make you learn vocabulary, even though it won't achieve comprehension and the memories won't be sustained, let alone used. But learning to trust yourself is up to you and takes time. Making a conscious effort to develop these traits while you're at USF will be a game changer. Unfortunately, not developing them will have an impact too. When we think about the skills needed to succeed in college, we often talk about time management, study skills, reading comprehension, or collaboration instead of more complex competencies like conscientiousness. And while concrete skills are necessary to improve the skills and acquire the knowledge needed to perform at the next level, you'll need to develop the attitudes and aptitudes that allow you to stick with the skill as it improves and stay focused on a goal that is not yet within reach. Football players need the persistence to get out there and train and the resilience to get up after a hit. Musicians need the sustained attention to practice, sometimes even focusing on one line until it becomes automatic. Student government representatives need the bravery to step up and speak up and the patience to compromise and take slow steps toward change. Different academic majors and disciplines require specific skill set and knowledges. But just as general skills like writing bridge all areas of the academy, general competencies are needed to advance any academic practice because deep learning requires sustained engagement with material and application to enhance existing skills. Literacy, then, is a practice, and literacy practices require practice, which requires the competencies that support skill development. Perhaps it's more complicated to pinpoint a specific practice that develops your academic confidence than it is to point out and point at concrete skills, like learning to use Excel or MLA, that can be developed or demonstrated easily. But qualities like tenacity, hope, buy-in, passion, self-efficacy, self-regulation, and self-reflection produce results such as a sense of belonging, believing in yourself, and enjoying what you do. And those outcomes produce concrete consequences. If believing that belief impacts outcome is difficult to accept, just flip it. If you are sure you can't do something, are you more likely to give up? What if you don't believe you have the foundational skills or are capable of doing the work to succeed within the university or within a major? Or what if you don't think you can develop the competencies and habits necessary to advance your existing skills and succeed at the next level? In the face of fear, if you do not believe you can overcome the obstacle, you will freeze and shut down or run away and give up or fight against others instead of for yourself. We can put at least one fear to rest. You are here. You got into the group. We want you here. We want you to stay and to succeed. So welcome to the Academy. The University of South Florida is a competitive and selective institution, which means that your presence here reflects demonstration of the foundational skills required for entrance into the Academy. You have also demonstrated mastery of the basic academic literacy practices and the prerequisite competencies needed to communicate within an academic community. You've even made it through this entire reading, and we know there were a few long, sticky sentences in those last few paragraphs. That took grit. These competencies cannot be disconnected from your learning and reading and writing and success, and it doesn't help to ignore them. Our hope is that ENC 1101 will facilitate that continued development of the skills and competencies needed to acquire the advanced literacy practices required to participate within the academic discourse community and the affiliated communities within and around the Academy. Locating and explaining the literacy practice of a discourse community, especially one related to the broad academic discourse community, will help you better understand the role literacy plays within and across your communications, which will prepare you to explore the role you play in constructing these communications. Assignment 12.2. After completing the reading, respond to the following. Number 1. What competencies do you feel are most important to your success in ENC 1101 and why? Number 2. What is a competency you feel confident you possess? Number 3. How can well-developed competencies improve your ability to communicate with your group in general and in writing?